He was the quiet force behind some of the wildest, most jaw-dropping custom cars ever seen on television. A man who didn't need a flashy brand or a big ego to prove he was a master of his craft. Ian Roussel wasn't just building cars. He was building legacy. From twisted frames to rusted metal turned into rolling art, he took the weird, the impossible, the unwanted, and made it extraordinary. His show, Full Custom Garage, wasn't just a reality series. It was a raw, unfiltered dive into a world most people never get to see. The gritty, obsessive, and often exhausting life of a true gearhead artist. But then, something changed. The episodes slowed. Ian started to disappear, first from the show, then from social media. Rumors exploded. Was he sick? Did something happen behind the scenes? Fans began to wonder if Ian had faced a private tragedy so devastating that it took the fire out of a man who once breathed life into scrap metal. And what came to light was even more heartbreaking than anyone expected. But before we dive into how things started unraveling, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're into deep dives like this. We break down the biggest stories in entertainment without the fluff, just facts, receipts, and a bit of chaos. And trust me, you're gonna want to see how this one ends. Long before cameras followed him around the desert, before his name was known by car fanatics worldwide, Ian Roussel was simply a guy with a welder, a vision, and a dream. He wasn't trained in some fancy design school or sponsored by high-end garages. He learned by doing, by grinding, welding, and creating from pure passion. In the early days, Ian worked out of modest spaces, often building cars with limited resources. But what set him apart was his eye for what could be. Where others saw junk, Ian saw possibility. He didn't build cars that followed the rules. He tore up the rule book and wrote his own. People started noticing. His builds were popping up at local shows and in underground car mags. Then word spread. There was this guy out in the California desert making insane rides that looked like something out of a Mad Max movie. No blueprints, no crew, just pure custom creativity. When MAVTV came calling with an offer to create a show around his work, Ian didn't jump at it for fame. He did it because it meant more time in the garage. That was the only thing he ever really wanted. And so, Full Custom Garage was born. From the very first episode, Full Custom Garage didn't play by the usual TV rules. There were no staged fights, no phony deadlines, no celebrities pretending to be gearheads. It was just Ian, some metal, and a vision. And that's exactly why it connected so deeply with viewers. Unlike shows that relied on dramatics or hyped-up personalities, Ian's work spoke for itself. Each build was a story. A rusted frame transformed into a low-slung masterpiece. An old truck morphed into something out of a retro, futuristic fever dream. Fans weren't just watching a build, they were witnessing art. But what most viewers didn't see was the pressure building behind the scenes. The show ran on a tight budget. Ian did most of the work himself, from fabrication to painting, often working long hours with barely a break between builds. As the show gained traction, MAVTV began pushing for faster turnarounds and bigger ideas. But Ian wasn't interested in mass-producing content. He wanted to stay true to his roots. That created friction. And while Ian rarely spoke publicly about the network, insiders claimed he was battling to keep creative control, resisting the push to turn Full Custom Garage into something it was never meant to be. That resistance came at a price. With fame came pressure. Fans wanted more episodes. The network wanted more speed. But Ian, ever the perfectionist, wasn't willing to rush his art. The work took time, sometimes weeks, just to fabricate one part. And behind the scenes, that pressure was starting to show. By season 5, eagle-eyed viewers noticed Ian looked more worn down. The spark in his eyes was dimmer. He seemed quieter, more tired. The once energized builder who joked mid-weld and grinned as sparks flew now appeared focused to the point of exhaustion. The hours were long. The builds were getting more intense. And still, the crew was small, often just Ian and a helper or two. Fans started posting online. Is Ian okay? He doesn't look like himself. Hope he's not burning out. But there were no answers, just silence. The same man who poured himself into his work had started to pull away from the public eye, and then he vanished. The silence became deafening. What began as a few missed uploads and longer gaps between episodes soon turned into an all-out disappearance. Loyal fans who had followed Full Custom Garage religiously began scouring every corner of the internet for clues. Facebook groups popped up dedicated to finding out what happened to Ian Roussel. Reddit threads speculated wildly, some suggesting health scares, others whispering about something more ominous, a devastating loss, or even a potential legal gag order. The comment sections on old episodes became makeshift memorials. Hope you're okay, Ian. Still waiting, still watching. Your work got me through hard times, man. Please come back. But Ian never replied. It was as if he had ghosted not just the industry, but the entire world. In the custom car community, this kind of silence was unheard of. Builders and personalities usually thrive on connection, especially with fans. But Ian was different. He had always been a lone wolf. He wasn't interested in fame or attention. Still, the sudden drop-off was too sharp, too complete to be shrugged off as just needing a break. Then there were the odd sightings. Fans claimed to spot Ian in remote locations, an obscure car show, in the desert, a gas station off Route 66, a brief glance at a swap meet. Each sighting was vague and unconfirmed, but they all described the same thing: a thinner, quieter man, often alone, with a shadow hanging over him. One fan said he looked haunted. Another described him as barely recognizable. Rumors intensified when a longtime friend of Ian's, also in the custom car scene, was interviewed on a podcast. When asked about Ian, he went silent for several seconds before quietly saying, "He's going through something. I won't speak on it, but it's heavy." The host didn't press further, but the internet took it and ran. He's sick. He lost someone close to him. He's hiding a diagnosis. He walked away from it all. He's gone through a tragedy. The more people speculated, the more elusive Ian became. No videos, no updates, no appearances. And as each month passed, the mystery only deepened. Then came the episode that never aired. According to sources close to production, there was a final episode of Full Custom Garage that was shot but never released. It reportedly featured one of Ian's most ambitious builds, a tribute to someone important to him, possibly a family member. The tone of the episode, insiders claimed, was unlike anything fans had seen before. Somber, emotional, vulnerable. The network, unsure how to market something so raw, shelved it. That only fueled more heartbreak from fans. If Ian had opened up in that episode, if he had finally shown what he was carrying, why keep it from the people who had supported him for years? But there was another side to it. Maybe Ian didn't want it released. Maybe the grief was too real, too personal, too sacred to be shared on screen. Maybe it wasn't meant for the fans. It was meant for him, a final goodbye, a therapeutic process, a way to weld together the pieces of a broken heart one last time. Either way, that missing episode became legend. Proof that something profound had changed in Ian's life. Proof that his disappearance wasn't about money or ratings or burnout. It was something deeper. And though Ian remained silent, the community didn't forget him. Across car shows and social media, tributes began to pop up. Custom builds were dedicated in his name. Artists painted murals. Longtime fans created tribute videos showcasing his greatest builds, adding soft music and emotional messages, some even tearing up on camera. One fan called Ian the last of the real ones. Another said, "He showed us what it meant to build with your soul." But behind all of it, one question remained. What happened to Ian Roussel? The man who once filled our screens with sparks, sweat, and steel had vanished, leaving behind a trail of questions and a silence more powerful than words. And still, that wasn't the whole story. Behind the garage doors and roaring welders, Ian Roussel was facing a storm no one could see. According to people close to him, those who've spoken under anonymity, his life wasn't as rock solid as the frames he built. Underneath the grease and metal was a man dealing with overwhelming pressure and, more tragically, a string of personal losses. One of the most painful moments reportedly came when Ian lost someone incredibly close to him, an unnamed family member who had been his emotional anchor. While Ian never went public with the details, fans noticed something shifted in him shortly after. His demeanor darkened, his once playful interactions with fans stopped, his already private life became nearly impenetrable. Then came the health issues. While no official diagnosis has ever been confirmed, several insiders suggested Ian was battling with chronic health complications. Nothing fatal, but enough to derail his energy and slow his work. Rumors swirled about. Autoimmune conditions, back problems from decades of physical labor, and even a brief hospitalization. The show never addressed it, neither did Ian, but the signs were there. Adding to this weight was the pressure from the network. MAV-TV had been quietly making changes behind the scenes, budget cuts, creative limitations, and a push to polish the show for wider audiences. But Ian didn't want polished. He wanted real. He wasn't interested in making full custom garage into a personality-driven show with phony drama and clean-shaven actors. That battle over the soul of the show drained him. For every build he completed, there were days of fighting behind closed doors. The show may have been his name, but it wasn't entirely his anymore. And then, in the middle of all this turmoil, Ian made a choice. He walked away. Some say it wasn't a decision, it was a necessity. The garage, once his sanctuary, had become a source of stress and grief. The cameras, once unseen companions, now felt like invaders. Ian didn't just disappear from television, he disappeared from everything. Because when your soul's been broken, and your passion begins to feel like a burden, sometimes the only way to survive is to let it all go. When Ian left the spotlight, he also left behind something much more sacred, his legendary workshop. The garage had become an extension of his identity. More than a place of work, it was a living museum of creativity. Each corner held a story. Each tool bore the imprint of years spent in raw, unfiltered dedication. Fans always imagined it buzzing with life, music in the background, welders flashing, metal grinding. But when Ian disappeared, the garage grew quiet. People who visited the location after filming described it as eerie, like walking through a space frozen in time. Half-finished projects still sat on lifts. Tools were laid out like someone had just stepped away for a break, but never returned. Dust collected on body panels, and a thin layer of silence settled in the air. It was more than just a workshop. It was a graveyard of potential, a silent tribute to the man who gave it everything until he had nothing left to give. Some fans hoped he'd return. Others feared it was his final goodbye. One former crew member quietly remarked, "It felt like Ian poured his soul into that space, and when he left, it felt like the soul left with him." Even in his absence, Ian Roussel's impact never faded. The community he helped create, welders, painters, gearheads, hobbyists, and dreamers, refused to let his name be forgotten. Online tributes multiplied. Fans from around the world began showcasing their own builds inspired by Ian's work. From teenagers building their first rat rods in backyards, to seasoned builders resurrecting old muscle cars, the hashtag #BuiltLikeIan became a badge of honor. Car shows started hosting full custom tribute nights. One man built a replica of Ian's famous chopped and channeled pickup from season 2 and drove it cross-country just to share it with other fans. Another woman, a former welder-turned-teacher, created an art piece made from spare parts, shaped into the letters IAN, and displayed it at her school's auto shop. People didn't just admire his work, they lived by his philosophy: create with heart, build without limits. Don't wait for permission. Even competitors in the industry paid their respects. Prominent builders, some who had once dismissed the show as too raw, came forward to acknowledge Ian's unmatched dedication. He wasn't doing it for ratings, one said. He was doing it because it was who he was. And that legacy, the soul-deep love for the art of building, kept Ian's spirit alive long after the cameras stopped rolling. It's the question that continues to haunt fans to this day. Will Ian Roussel ever come back? In the years since his disappearance, the rumors have only grown more complex. Some say he's building again, quietly, off camera, for himself. Others insist he's retired completely, living a peaceful life somewhere in the Southwest, tending to a small farm and working on cars only when he feels like it. A few conspiracy-minded fans even suggest that Ian is secretly working on a comeback project, a raw, unfiltered docuseries that tells his side of the story. No network, no censors, just truth. But so far, Ian has said nothing. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe Ian doesn't need to return. Maybe he already gave everything he had to give. Maybe walking away was the most honest thing he could do, to protect his passion, his peace, and his soul. If he never picks up a torch again, it won't diminish what he gave us. He taught an entire generation to build not for glory, but for love. He showed us what it looks like to bleed into your work, to chase dreams with dirty hands and calloused fingers. And he proved that even in silence, a legacy can echo louder than words. Ian Roussel was never just a builder. He was a storyteller, a man who welded narratives into every frame and etched emotion into every curve. Full Custom Garage wasn't about cars. It was about freedom, about breaking molds, about the beautiful, relentless pursuit of making something. Yours in a world that tries to make everyone the same. His tragedy isn't just that he disappeared. It's that so few people ever truly understood what he was carrying. The weight of loss, the exhaustion of creation, the quiet devastation of watching your sanctuary become a cage. But even if Ian Roussel never returns to our screens, his story isn't over, because the spark he lit in garages around the world still burns. And as long as there's someone out there cutting steel with a vision in their mind and a fire in their chest, Ian's legacy lives on. Sometimes the loudest impact is made not with a scream, but with a quiet, undeniable presence that never leaves you. That is Ian Roussel's true masterpiece.